Welcome to the Edgework podcast here on the Hammer Betting Network. This is episode number 2 with our crew, the guys from the fourth period, David Pagnotta, Dennis Bernstein. I'm Zack Bodenstein. And guys, where do we start? Of course, we have to start with Bo Horvat. The whole landscape of the Vancouver Canucks was kind of touched on last week in the first episode. But today, things are kind of different because they actually have been proactive. They've dealt their captain, Bo Horvat, now a New York Islander. They get the return, and a pretty good one in that for a rental that they didn't see, a long-term fit with in terms of the contract situation with Aatu, Raty, Anthony Beauvillier, who could kind of rekindle that magic that he found a few years ago. And they also get that protected first-round pick. So, Dave, let's start with you. Your overall take on this Bo Horvat trade and perhaps some extension talk on your end, if you're hearing anything.
Yeah, I'll start there quickly. Yes, they started right away. They weren't able to talk to Pat Morris, Horvat's agent, before the trade, but as soon as it was done, they reached out to start that process. I don't know how far along it is now, a few days later, but they did start it, or at least reached out right away to get the ball rolling. So I've got to imagine, like everybody else has been saying, that Lou has an idea as to what the number is going to be to get Horvat signed. And that's why he made the move, because he felt comfortable enough that he'd at least be in the ballpark of trying to get him done. And if he doesn't sign, then I guess he'll just sewer him or something like that later on and whatever to save face. But, everybody is pointing to an extension getting done at some point. I'm of the belief that, knowing how Lou Lamoriello operates, that is there. It's going to, I think he's confident it's going to happen. So we'll have to wait and see what those numbers ultimately are. In terms of the return, guys, it wasn't a grand slam, maybe a solo shot just over the wall. I think it was a good return. I think Raty's going to be a good player. He fell in the draft. There were a lot of people that surprised he fell that much, even though a lot of teams passed on him. But he was their best prospect. And I'll premise it by saying the Islanders' prospect pool is not deep at all. It's like a kiddie pool, but he was the top guy. And, is he a top 6? Does he have top 6 potential? Yes. Probably a second line type guy, but you add that, you add a first round pick, wherever it's going to land. And then you get a guy in a potential reclamation project in Anthony Beauvillier, or Antonio Beauvillier, depending on how you want to pronounce that. And I think it was decent. I think it was a decent return, DB.
It was decent. You could have waited till March 3rd. Got Patrick Alvin think this was his best offer. So he took it. Beauvillier, for the reason the Islanders are in a hole is because of guys like Beauvillier who haven't scored. So maybe, fresh start. I'm all for that. Raty, I agree. He fell in the draft. Who knows? Conditional first. I guess the other side's more intriguing because it's not just about Bo and do you sign him, but what do you sign him at? Because, Bo's on track for a 50-goal season, but I think he's shooting at 21%. He's not going to shoot 21% for the balance of the contract. So you're going to pay him at a 50-goal level, or you're going to pay him for what he probably is as a 30-30 guy. And is that $8 million? Is that $7 million? Is that $7.5 million? Is that good enough? Is there some other team that Pat Morris and the crew would be willing to go at free agency and talk to about? I don't know. The one thing in Lou's favor is he can re-sign it for an extra year. So the all-in price on his contract is probably going to be the most from the Islanders. But now they have to sign him. Now, the question is, he's a center, so where do you do it? I assume you put Barzal on the left because he's not close to the face-off guy. I think Bo's won the second most face-offs in the NHL this season. So he's going to be a center. And so it's going to be Brock Nelson and Bo Horvat would be a nice 1-2 punch. But I think that's the next question. Do you sign this guy, and what do you sign him at?
Yeah. Well, and that's just it. Like the offer that the Canucks presented to Bo Horvat was a 7-year deal. And as far as we know, it was under $7.5 million. I think it was around 7. Now, maybe that got bumped up because allegedly they presented a revised offer last week, or at least the discussion of it. I'm not convinced there was a formal offer, but it doesn't matter now. He's an Islander. So, is it going to be 8.5? Are the Islanders comfortable with that? Is Lou comfortable with that? Again, he's got to know the range that it would take to get Bo Horvat locked in, or else he probably wouldn't have made this trade. So there's familiarity, at least, with the range if you're trusting the Canucks and what they're presenting and what they're telling you. And now he knows firsthand because him and Pat Morris have had a discussion about it. But, where do you go from there? And then you're right, DB. Does Nelson move to the left? Does Barzal move to the right? Like, how?
Yeah.
I'm not sure how and do you want to load up from a goal scoring perspective? Do you want to have Nelson along with Bo Horvat and then probably Palmieri on the right would be a guess? Or do you want to have Horvat, Lee on the left, and Barzal on the right? Like that, it's a little confusing. I know Barzal struggled a little bit at the center position in terms of his defensive responsibilities this year, but I mean, probably trying to do too much because, this team had some issues this month, or I guess in January with respect to defense. So as good of a defensive team as they are, but
let's be real.
Look, it's a wait and see mode.
The reason they got in the last 7 games, they haven't scored more than 2 goals. So, and he has to sign him now. Lou's boxed in here. Like he's got to make the playoffs. He's got to sign this player. And if he doesn't, then he's not going to. We reported he doesn't have a contract for next season. Like, I'm not saying this desperation, but it was the right move because this team needs to be propped up offensively. But now there's still work to do. It's not like they got a guy with term here, guys. They got a guy on a walk here who could very easily jam up their plans by saying, "Yeah, you know what? I'm going to wait." And here's the thing: why can't Bo Horvat wait until I don't know, right at the end of the season, take it to the end? So that's what I would do because I gotta think there might be another team. And not only that, if they miss the playoffs, does Bo want to stay there? I don't know. It's this story. You think it was over when the deal was made? It's far from over, especially from an Islander standpoint, at least in the moment, because they have to make the playoffs. That's really not negotiable for at least the general manager's perspective.
DB, two of those 2 things actually has to happen. If one of them doesn't, it's a disaster. They have to make the playoffs and they have to re-sign this player. If not, it's a total waste of a trade and you're giving up some decent assets. Now, last week, you're right, DB, we were talking about the New York Islanders and the fact that they don't score goals. They bring this player in, obviously, with the hope that he's going to bring more offense. And on top of that, we also talked about how guys like Wahlstrom and Beauvillier just haven't followed up on pretty good starts to their career. And this is a good opportunity for Beauvillier. I talked to you guys about this right after the trade happened. If you slot him in where Mikheyev was and you put him with Pettersson and Kuzmenko, you can rekindle something there. I do still believe in the player. He's got a shoot first mentality. So, Dave, Anthony Beauvillier, don't sleep on him in the return.
Right. I think this is, like we were saying, I think this is an opportunity to have this little reclamation project under your belt. He's got a $4.15 million cap hit. He's got 1 more year left on his contract. Can he fit? And what has Jim Rutherford been talking about for the last several weeks? We're going to make moves. We want to get guys in their mid-20s, early to mid-20s. Well, they got that. Can Beauvillier be a consistent 20-goal scorer? He's not a first-line player, but can he be a consistent 20-goal scorer? This is what they're going to find out. And if it doesn't work, because this is a rebuild / retool or whatever the hell they want to call it there in Vancouver.
They called it major surgery, actually. So.
Well, I mean, this was they got rid of an artery that, and they're trying to repair it. So can Bo be a guy who can get you 20 goals a year? Can he play at that pace? And if not, well, he's got 1 more year left on his contract, like I said. So you look to flip him next season as another possibility because this is not going to take 1 year for them to kind of rebound. Their core is Quinn Hughes, Elias Pettersson, JT Miller, and Kuzmenko right now. Mm-hmm. Demko's not in there.
No.
And we talked about this earlier on in the season, guys, that there was some question marks surrounding Demko's desire to stick around. It's obviously been amplified a lot over the last couple of weeks. A few people, and I'll give Elliot Friedman a lot of credit on this one. Well, maybe because we've kept it quiet. We were kind of told to, but he kind of blew this one out. That Demko is out there, and there are and they have had those discussions. Now, I personally believe that this is going to be something that's going to happen in the summer, because I don't see him being there for the duration of his contract. But major surgery, it includes that. It includes Brock Besser, Connor Garland, one way or another, Luke Shen, Tyler Myers. et cetera, et
Just name the
cetera,
whole
et
roster,
cetera.
Dave.
Yeah, basically. I mean, they're going to make changes, and Bo's going to. I mean, we're going to find out what he can do, and is he going to be a player that's a complementary piece to the core?
Yeah, so the Vancouver Canucks obviously expected to make all of these changes. The trade deadline, guys, just about a month away.
And just one other thing, sorry, on the Islanders note, I was told the other day Oliver Wahlstrom is done for the season. His injury, which I'm not going to reveal out of respect to them and to the Islanders, requires surgery. He either had it or is in the process of getting it. So all indications I'm being told is he's done for the season. So that frees up a bit of a roster spot. They're doing some cap maneuvering right now to try to maximize their cap. If the Islanders get back into it in terms of playoff position, and there's a little bit of wiggle room to add by the deadline to help their chances even more, I would not be shocked if Lou tries to do something else, if all those things happen.
Yeah, it's a big loss up front, considering what his potential is. And, of course, the Islanders on the outside looking in, trying to get in. We'll talk about the playoff bracket a little bit more. But, of course, Vancouver has all these pieces to unload at this point. And, DB, is your feeling that they want to be competitive as soon as next year? Or is this something that's going to take a few years for Vancouver to kind of get back into it?
I think they're – well, when I look at the defense and goaltending, I don't think they're a contender next year. Like that's the major surgery. Like, if Demko's really not the guy you're going to trade him, who's your goalie? Spencer Martin? It's not Colin Delia. The blue line, that's why they're in that hole, because they traded for an OEL who's past his prime, who doesn't want to be traded and won't waive because he said, Elka, I waived to come to Vancouver. I like it here. I'm not leaving. Who's trading for Tyler Myers? Like, look, I keep going back to Christopher Tanev. That was the biggest mistake. And Markstrom leaving, yeah, that was a problem too. But Christopher Tanev, Quinn Hughes, he's had a great season, but he solidified that defense. So, do I see him as a contender next season? Well, they're going to have a training camp for Taka to put in his new system. If they play better defense, and he's a defense-first guy, I guess they'll be better defensively. But let me see the surgery first. Let me diagnose the patient after the surgery. Okay, Zach, because like this roster is not a playoff roster. So can you tell me their next season they're going to be a playoff team? Nope. Let me see the changes. Let's see what they do to the defense. Let's see what happens in net before I can say, yeah, this is a legit playoff team. Now, the one thing in their favor is the West isn't a bear right now. Like, if they have 5 more wins, they'd be in the playoff race, right? So I don't. It's easy to get back in the race, but again, let's see what the surgery looks like. Let's see what the patient looks like afterwards, and then we can assess their likelihood for making the playoffs next season.
Yeah, think about how many multi-goal leads they blew too. So you talked about 5 wins would kind of get them back in it. If even half of those didn't happen, right, they're probably in the thick of things. But again, the problems with this team go way beyond that. So the Vancouver Canucks, we will see, because there's lots to come with this team. So Bo Horvat was not given the opportunity to talk extension with another team before the trade actually was orchestrated. Timo Meier, that's not the case, Dave. The Sharks are actually giving teams permission to talk extension with him before a deal is done. What are you hearing? What are you feeling right now in the Timo Meier talk?
Right. Well, they will. So they've got to agree to the parameters of a deal. So they have to be comfortable with, okay, if you sign him to an extension, here's what the package is going to look like. So once they figure that out, then they'll say, okay, Team X, go talk to Claude Lemieux, his agent, see if you can hammer out a deal. Like, Claude thinks that his client's getting traded. But team's not going to pay the max or a premium, at least, if they don't know that they can get him locked into an extension. Now, yes, he's a restricted free agent, but as we all should know by now, that $10 million qualifying offer that he has to retain his rights is hanging over, which is why it makes it easier to facilitate a trade if you don't have to worry about that and you have an extension in place. So for teams that want Timo Meier, hold on, I'm just looking. Sorry, I thought I saw something. Then you better be able to pay up, and then you can negotiate that extension. And if it works out, boom, trade's done, contract's done, all that stuff. But yes, New Jersey definitely in the mix on Timo Meier, and they'd love to make it happen. They have the tools to make it happen, but I don't know what Mike Grier and San Jose is asking for. Like, if they want, Nemec, I don't see that necessarily happening as the main piece of a return. Alex Holtz, probably. Holtz a first-round pick.
And I doubt they're trading
top-tier-
the rights to Jack Hughes' brother.
No.
Right, exactly. So I think there's more of an appetite for them to move out a player like Holtz, a prospect and young player like Holtz, because again, you're bringing in Timo Meier, who's 26 and presumably locked into a 7-8 year extension. So I think that makes sense. But yeah, Nemec and Luke Hughes, I think those are off the table in terms of a willingness. So does that mean, again, it's Holtz a first and another young top quality asset? And is there another team like the New York Rangers who would beat that? Like, would they be willing to move out Kakko? Would they be willing to move out Lafreniere? I don't know.
You already got in trouble once for that.
Sense.
You already got in trouble once for that.
I know.
With that player.
I know. I got in trouble for telling the truth, and their camp was being lied to, but they found that out after, so it's okay. Thick skin. It's okay. I'm honestly, I'm curious about what the Rangers try to do here, because they were in on Horvat. They lose out on Horvat. Do they want to lose out on Timo Meier to New Jersey now? I think that's the other consideration for a team like the New York Rangers. So, and yes, there are other parties, and because he's RFA and controllable, that's why we're hearing Buffalo, which is what we first reported a couple weeks ago, which is why we're hearing teams like Philly, Montreal, Detroit, totally out of it, that have knocked on the door to see what that price tag is going to be. And then you've got the contending teams, the Rangers, the Devils, and so on. So it's going to be interesting to see how this one unfolds, but it definitely looks like he's going to be moved at some point. Is anyone going to step up before the deadline to make that happen? We got 4.5 weeks to see.
If the Rangers missed out on Timo Meier, what about Patty Kane? Have you heard anything on him? Because, again, everything that I've seen is that they haven't even had that conversation yet. But are they a team that might be interested in a guy like Kane, a guy who, of course, is a pending UFA on a last-place team?
Well, yeah, I mean, the Rangers are definitely linked to and have legitimate interest in Patrick Kane. I think this week they've started, I believe, it might be right after All-Star, but I think the plan was to at least connect this week with Kane, Taves, their agent Pat Brisson, Kyle Davidson, the GM of the Hawks, to at least start this process. Like, there's no decision that's going to be made until probably mid to late February, but the Rangers will be in it in terms of Patrick Kane. But I don't know if it's clear cut. Like, I don't know if they're willing to give up a top tier young kid in a package and also figure out how the hell to make the money work. So I don't know if, I mean, yes, in terms of destinations, they're right up there, but they're going to have to get creative in how they potentially make this happen. The other team, guys, it's not talked about enough. I keep trying to, I guess, pump the tires on this one, much to the chagrin of Jim Nill and the Dallas Stars. But I think Dallas is right in there. And I think that Patrick Kane would consider Dallas as well as an option, along with the New York Rangers. If he does decide, DB, to get moving, I think Dallas and New York are right up there.
And there's history in Dallas about a long-time player with a franchise who was there forever coming over, Joe Pavelski. So if I'm Jim Nill, I want Joe Pavelski to talk to Patrick Kane and say, hey, I came here. We have a great team. It's a great place to live. It's a tax-free state. So that makes sense. And I think the Rangers, that's a pure rental. So if you're gonna trade for Timo Meier, you're gonna probably have to give up less for Patrick Kane. At least I would think so. To me, that's the more logical thing, because I think Patrick fits in this.
Yeah, you talked about Kakko and Lafreniere. When those guys get top line reps, they've been doing their thing. They've looked good. It's just a matter of them getting those opportunities. So do they obviously move on to go all in this year? We will see. Dave, or I should say DB, let's get to you about the LA Kings, because there's talk about them maybe getting some help in net. They've got 3 goalies on the books right now. Mm-hmm. 2 of them are pretty expensive. 1 not so much, but he's playing like a starter. They lost to Carolina yesterday. He didn't have much help out there when he gave up, most of those 5 goals. But your overall take on the LA Kings goalie situation right now, and perhaps if they are in the market for another goalie.
Well, there's some chatter about Thatcher Demko, who's injured right now. But unless you're sitting Cal Peterson back, if you trade for Thatcher Demko, you've got over $15 million in cap space in net when you really need a left defenseman. Like, it makes no sense to me. And not only that, what are you going to do? Are you going to waive Phoenix Copley? Well, Phoenix Copley, and he contributed to the loss last night. He gave him a bad rebound on that second goal the first goal in the third period that made it 4-2. Wasn't great on the tip in. Power play goal in overtime wasn't his fault. The guy's 15-3-1. And if you look at his numbers, they're about the same as Martin Jones. And Martin Jones, that people think, what a great reclamation project. He's had a great year. His numbers are the same. The team's playing really good in front of him. You're not going to waive Jonathan. There's 30 games left in the regular season. Jonathan Quick's played for 15 years? You're not waiving Jonathan Quick in a trade like this. So I don't get, and people say about Cam Talbot, you can't guarantee me that Cam Talbot, who also is injured, is going to be a better replacement than Phoenix Copley. They're stuck right now. So this chatter about making a trade for a goaltender, a fourth goaltender, like, let's be real, guys. What legit contending team has 4 goaltenders that are all healthy?
Yeah.
Like, what are you going to do? Waive Jonathan Quick and put him in the minors? No. Are you going to waive Phoenix Copley? He's going to get picked. He's going to get claimed. They'll fix this problem in the off season, not now. It just doesn't make sense. What they really need to do, what Rob needs to do, because what's happening now when you watch, and they're still winning games, they're on track for 97 points. They have the third easiest schedule remaining. They've played a lot of games. They've played 53 games, right? But what the better teams are doing, like Carolina did, like Tampa did the other night when they played them, they forecheck the hell out of this team because the defense, moving the puck, they have issues clearing the puck from their own zone. It's just not working. They need a legitimate left defense. Sean Jersey, really like the kid. He's tried really hard, producers offense with this kid. He's not a left defenseman. He's just not. He's playing off his backhand a lot, and teams see that, and they scout it, and that's going to be challenging an issue. They need to make that trade if they're going to make a trade in season, which they may not even do, they need to go get Chicken. They need to go get Provorov. They need to go rent Gavrikov. That's what they need to do here, not get another goaltender. Yep. Because if you look at I don't see it from a cap. Like, you're really going to spend $15 million on goaltending when you're really, truly not a contender? Like, if Columbus ever gets healthy and trades for a 2C, they're going to win the West. But if not, teams like LA, if they take a big swing and that's the only team, you swing for a left defense, you can get out of win the division, and you could get out of the West if Colorado's not going to be at full strength. So that's my take. Yeah, there's going to be a new goaltender in Los Angeles. It won't be this season. It'll be next season.
Jacob Chikrin. Rob,
and
listen to me.
Throw the goalie
Do
into
it.
a bargain. Big swing.
Yeah,
big
right.
swing.
Make it huge. Make it huge. We know that LA loves Jacob Chikrin. They'd love to make it happen. I don't know specifically what they were asking for now. I know last year they were asking for Gabe Vilardi to be part of a deal. Obviously, that's not happening now. But I mean, you got to figure out a way to get Jacob Chikrin in there. Like, I know, like, Gavrikov, I think would be a great stopgap. Yeah. And he's under 30. I mean, what is he, 27, I believe. Mm-hmm. And he's a sturdy, strong, stay-at-home defenseman that if I'm any contending team, I'm taking him on my team. So I don't, and they're asking for a first-round pick as part of that deal. I don't know if Rob does that, Rob Blake. But Jacob Chikrin, man, like 2 more years on that deal, $4.6 million cap hit.
And he's playing great. He's been great since he came back.
Like, his price is justified now.
Impact player for sure.
Yep. And because of his performance, that 3 to 4 asset package is like I said, it's justified. So I just want to see it happen. I've been clamoring for LA to go after this since we found out first that he was available and that teams were taking calls on him. So I say do it. I mean, again, I don't know the price, so it's a hell of a lot easier for me to say that because I want it to happen.
Here's the thing. The Kings now, after they're on their bye weeks, so they're going to be playing on the 13th or something like that. The 4 games after the break, like, that's 4 key games. You have a couple of home games, then they go back out east for like another 5 or 6 game road trip. These 4 games they played right after the break. That's going to be an indication to Rob of what to do, right? Because I always remember what Dean Lombardi told me here way back in the day. When you're getting to this point in the season, you want your team to show you that they want help, that they need another piece to add to make a run. Like, so those 4 games before they go on away, if they lose those 4 games, then Rob, right now, they're going to make the playoffs. So Rob's not in panic mode. He has to make that massive move for a goaltender or a left defenseman. It would be nice. It would be great. So and Rob's the most conservative GM I've ever come across. So when Dave talks about trading his first-round pick, they didn't have a first-round pick last year because they traded for Fiala. Look how that worked. That worked pretty decently. So to have 2 seasons in a row of no first-round pick, not for a rental, like for Jacob Chikrin, yeah. And maybe throw in another third. It's these first-round picks when you're 20, 22, 23, whatever, you make the playoffs, they're not that valuable. And I've always said that these I'm a Rams fan, and they traded all their draft picks to win it all. So I'm all for trading draft picks because I just think that most of these guys, and I could go down the list in LA, like Turcotte was a 5th overall pick, hasn't worked out. Byfield,
and that's the thing.
Yeah,
like you can afford to give up your first round pick, like DB's talking about, not only because you got a guy in their mid 20s that's controllable. You've got one of the deepest prospect pools in the National Hockey League. So you can afford to give up a first, like going back to Jersey, their prospect pool is deep.
Yep.
So you can give up a top kid and a first round pick and really not miss a beat if you're keeping a guy in his mid 20s that's signed. Yep. Like LA Turcotte, he hasn't worked out, but is Turcotte following that same pattern as Gabe Vilardi in terms of, now Vilardi had injuries and a whole bunch of other things, but is he following that similar pattern in terms of his progression? Like Quentin Byfield is not going to get moved unless it's a ridiculous blockbuster that's not, I mean, you're talking about a different type of player coming back. But he's taking a little bit of time to adjust.
The challenge is with Turcotte and all these other prospects, at least on the forward wall, Zach, they got too many players because all these guys were signed. Like, Moore got signed to an extension. Fiala's signed to an extension. Maybe you would move out a guy like Victor Arvidsson, who would have 1 year left on his deal. But they have Trevor Moore signed to a deal. I assume they're going to keep Vilardi. They have Kaliev. They got too many forwards. And at some point, Rob's going to have to make the deal. It's just that he's very conservative and taking his time. And the team's in a playoff spot, so he's not panicking.
Too many cooks in the kitchen, they say.
Yeah, exactly. It's a good problem.
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah. And sorry, I keep looking at my phone. And before I was trying to find a piece of paper to write Jacob Chikrin. But also, while we're recording this, the Columbus Blue Jackets have announced that Gustav Nyquist is done for the regular season. But they specified regular season.
Right, exactly.
He does not require surgery.
So please trade
but
for him.
It does hurt his trade value. So is a team going to be willing to give up like a 5th, 6th round pick maybe for Gus Nyquist in hopes that that he comes back for the playoffs? And because if he is done, then you can LTIR him. Mm-hmm. Have him come back for postseason, and there you go, Tampa Bay Lightning.
Oh, no, you didn't. I trade him for future consideration. But if I'm Tampa, I'm saying future considerations because I don't know if he's going to play or not. Or, a conditional 5th that goes to a 3rd if he plays, if he plays in the playoffs or something like that.
Right, exactly. Plays 4 games in the playoffs. It goes from a 6th to a 3rd or a 4th or whatever.
I'd love to see him there. That would be a great fit because we talked about their forward depth and even their blue line depth. I'd love to see them go after Luke Schenn. To have Chernak, Schenn, Perbix on the right side would be excellent. And for a guy like Nyquist, who played really well in that playoff run with the Sharks a few years ago when they got him at the deadline, for them to kind of move a guy down, slot down a left winger, maybe move Nick Paul to the middle, whatever they want to do, they can get kind of creative there with this lineup. So Tampa, we talk about it all the time. They cruise towards the postseason. They really start to get it going on. Guys, Andrei Vasilevsky doesn't even have a shutout in like his last 84 games or something like that in the regular season. But in the playoffs, as Leafs fans know, it's hard to score on that guy. So Tampa is certainly looking towards the playoffs. I wouldn't count them out for Gustav Nyquist either.
I wouldn't count now that there's this parameter in place, now that there's this little asterisk next to him that he's done for the regular season. I don't know what this means. The regular season. It's like Joey from Friends. I'm sorry. This is a team that I would look at.
Regular season though.
Because I'm trying to emphasize. That's why I was doing it wrong. I was trying to emphasize playoffs. Okay. Like if I'm Toronto, I'm going, crap. Are the Bolts going to pull this stuff off? And are we going to have to face this guy in the postseason? Like if I'm the Leafs, who have a little bit of cap space, but also LTIR could be in their favor here, and they're looking for somebody to come in on the second line left wing. I mean, if I'm a playoff team, I'm calling Columbus and I'm going, give me his medical report. I need to know if he's going to be potentially ready to come back in that first round, or if I'm a top tier team, maybe second round. Let me see his medical report. Let me see if he's going to come back. If it's realistic, we'll make it happen because he could be a hell of an ad in terms of depth scoring for a team come playoff time. I think it could be a pretty shrewd acquisition for a playoff-bound team.
When you look at the Leafs lineup, you got to think that, yes, there's chatter about D, but they also need a top six winger. Maybe he fits there too, like you said. We'll do a quick exercise to end it off, DB. One team that is currently in playoff position to miss the playoffs, and then one that is currently on the outside looking in to make it. We're at the All-Star break. This is a very good indicator of where teams stand at this point.
Okay. Since I love Daryl Sutter so much, I'll say that Calgary misses the playoffs. So they'll back up because they're still done. So that's it. The one team I think is going to get in that would, I think, warm everyone's heart if they did. Buffalo. I think Buffalo has their eyes on Washington because right now I think Pittsburgh got 3 games in hand on them, but they're 3 points behind Washington coming in, or maybe 5 now because Washington won last night. I like Buffalo. I think if they can clean up a little bit more defensively and on the back end down the stretch, they can get it because they can get hot. They're the best offensive team in the league. I think that's a team. And just the fact that they're in the conversation, this is already a win for this organization. Like it's a win for Kevin Adams. It's a win for Donnie Granato. It's a win for this organization. This is going to be a deep, dangerous team. Tage Thompson has galvanized the offense. You have 2 first overall picks on the blue line, and now Owen Power's scoring goals. So I would think that. And so a little facetious on Calgary, but I think the swap would be Washington out because they're still banged up. Tom Wilson's out again, and Buffalo takes that spot over the Islanders and the Florida Panthers.
Yeah, I'm worried about Washington more than Pittsburgh because like Pittsburgh goes through. I mean, they both go through kind of like spurts and roller coaster rides and all that stuff. But the Islanders, for me, I mean, this is another freaking team that's just infuriating because before they won 2 in a row and before they made this Horvat trade, they were out. Like the sky was falling on Long Island.
Done.
Like Long Island was breaking off, going into the Atlantic, hitting an iceberg, and going right down. And now they win 2 in a row. They get Horvat. I mean, there's some it's 50-50 on the trade, but I think his acquisition is going to help them get that extra goal, when they need it.
They're a better team right now.
Night, they might,
There's no question. They're a better team right now.
And when you've got Sorokin in net, and with that decor, I'm worried about the Caps. I think the Islanders have enough to bounce into a wild card spot. I think Washington could potentially drop out of it. Them or Pittsburgh, I'm leaning towards the Caps side, even though, I mean, like the playoff, the goals record's not going to count in the playoffs for Ovi, but that's kind of where I'm leaning towards. I think the West now is a little bit more secured with Colorado back in it. Mm-hmm. I don't really see a team jumping out. I'm a little worried about Vegas because I'm concerned about Mark Stone's overall injury.
Yep.
So there's a little bit of concern there from Vegas' side. I'm not ready to count them out by any stretch. I think Calgary's got a hell of a hill to climb. So that's going to be a tough one.
Vegas right now has like 2 things going for them. They're getting these reclamation / randoms just kind of coming in. Michael Mario, Paul Cotter, these guys are doing damage. Logan Thompson looks great, but this team, you mentioned the health. They can't score goals. They're not defending right now. They just got Shea Theodore back, but poor showing at MSG, poor showing on the island. It's not really clicking right now for the Golden Knights. That said, they have kind of solidified their position earlier in the year, but Dave, like you said, not a done deal with the Vegas Golden Knights right now, especially if Mark Stone's out long-term. They said week to week a couple weeks ago. So we'll see with the Vegas Golden Knights and Mark Stone.
When they, Zach, when they say week to week, it's never a week when they say week to week. It's never a week.
Yeah.
It's a month. When they say week to week, it's cross off a month for the guy because I'm pretty sure he's close to getting to a month out. And they're tough. And right now, Calgary's on the outside looking in, so it's going to be interesting. The one X factor I think in the West is Nashville. What's Nashville? They're starting to play better. They're another streaky team. They have the Nashville, obviously. They have the goalie in Saros. So we'll see. We'll see what they do. So there's 10 teams because St. Louis is done. If they're not backing up the moving vans to whatever that arena is now called, Enterprise or whatever, in St. Louis, they should be. Like that game in Winnipeg on, Monday, Zach? When they're up 2-0 in the third and lost 3-2, I'm like, okay, it's over. It's done. Like trade O'Reilly, trade Tarasenko, and just move on because this team is done. They're not making the playoffs.
And they've been battling injuries all year too now. Buchnevich out with Krug coming back. Mess in St. Louis. So they've got to figure some things out. Guys, have a great time in Florida for real this time. DB, your flight is coming up in a few hours. Dave, you'll be flying out soon as well. Have an excellent time. Check out their stuff on the fourth period in terms of the trade rumors, the trade talk, also the All-Star game coverage. It's going to be an awesome time. So that is episode 2 for the Edgework podcast. You can check out our best bets 5 days a week as well. So breaking down all the action in terms of betting and how you can make yourself some money. And we will bring you episode 3 next week here on the Edgework podcast. So thanks for listening and enjoy the rest of your day.